Hey, welcome back to the Breaking Bread Village. It's been a while. We were on a little bit of a vacation. And so we're back today so we can have this conversation. So I really appreciate everybody for being here today. We're going to talk a little bit about defunding the police, kind of where we are now. We're going to talk about this whole blue lives versus black lives. And so I'm just really excited to have the conversation. So get ready. It's about to start here in a second.
We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. One conversation at a time. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. One conversation at a time.
The Breaking Bread Village.
One conversation at a time.
The Breaking Bread Village.
One conversation at a time.
Awesome. So I just wanted to start off by saying this to our viewers. You know, we're going to talk about this whole blue lives versus black lives. And, you know, I know a couple people were kind of concerned with the word versus, you know, that I use. And I wanted to help you guys understand that, you know, versus was the word that I used because that is the narrative that's been given to us. We've been given this narrative of, you know, law enforcement against, you know, black lives. And it's been very dangerous. People have gotten killed from it. People have gotten hurt from it. There has been, of course, rioting and looting, and there has been a lot of just name calling and just a lot of bad energy in regards to this whole blue lives versus black lives. So I wanted to talk about that, and I wanted to kind of break that down a little bit. I also wanted to, you know, go ahead and cross this line because this is important. You know, we need to speak to both sides of this. I'm like that, and most people that know me know. I want to kind of understand people's backgrounds and their understandings of things to kind of get in, I guess, some type of equal playing ground and say, okay, here we are, you know, and right now over the summer, it was a big narrative in regards to, you know, blue lives being defunded and their lives mattering as well. And then also black lives matter and, you know, kind of finding a voice, so to speak. So with that said, you know, I want to welcome everybody onto the show and we're going to talk about it. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. James, if you can go first, Lawan second, Rick, and then Sheriff Christopher, if you can go last, that would be great.
Hi, my name is James Catoya. I'm a podcaster and freelance journalist. I'm also a DJ. I am pretty passionate into this topic just because of obviously being a black male, but also this being the my course of study in and some of the subjects that I followed as a journalist. I tend to turn more to political and social instances, and this is one that's near and dear to my heart. So I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you.
My name is Lawan Grigsby. I'm just a regular Joe Schmo. I work at General Motors here in Flint. Previously, I stayed in Midland for 7 years, so I can give a little aspect about, you know, the police in the Midland as opposed to where I stay now, which I think is different and it's important.
Thank you.
I'm Rick Hetherington. Great to be back. I'm a former Flint police officer. I retired 23 years. I'm now a defense attorney, and I'm from Flint, Michigan. Been living in Flint, Michigan my whole life, so I have a little input there.
Thank you.
Chris Swanson, Sheriff of Genesee County, which is the county that surrounds Flint, Michigan. And I'm going to my 28th year in law enforcement. I've worked up from intern all the way to sheriff. It's the greatest job I ever had in my life. My parents live in the city of Flint. And just like Rick, when you're born and raised, and for my case, professionally in the city of Flint, you have a really good perspective of different populations. So my heart is with the city, and what people saw on May 30th is showed Flint pride that they didn't have to burn the city down or create another negative image of the city of Flint. And rather, we became a beacon of light and a sign of hope, which is what led us to this conversation. Thank you, Aaron, for having me.
Yes, welcome everyone. So let's get right to it. Again, you know, Rick has been here before, and he's been here two times before actually talking about defund the police. So I want to talk a little bit about defund the police. We want to start there first and just what our thoughts about that. I'm going to I want LaJuan to start first and just give me some input of what you think defund the police means and why do you think we need it, or if we need it or don't need it, or whatever your thoughts are on it.
Well, initially, when I heard the word defund the police, I knew people were using that as a means to move money from the police to different social programs. But from my aspect, I don't know if I agree with so-called defund the police, because I am from Flint and I've lived here most of my life, and I've seen the impact of the police not being funded at all. We went from having a regular police force to where we had a skeleton force, and now today you can call the police right now for minor issues like noise ordinances, or somebody might be fighting in the street, and you might be lucky if the police show up at all. So as far as the police being defunded here, it's had a negative impact on especially the neighborhood that I'm in right now. So I'm not necessarily sure I agree with defunding the police.
Okay. Thank you. James?
So from my aspect, there are two different conversations when we are talking about defund the police. We're talking about the actual term, and then we are talking about essentially the social manufacturing aspect of it, to where we are moving funds from police departments and reallocating them to other public safety and community support services. LaJuan briefly spoke about the effect of when you see that overreach happen in the response of that. There are specific areas, and there are certain areas that can stand to move, allocate different resources to different options in different areas that can address issues that the police take care of that they may not entirely be scheduled there to address: poverty issues, homelessness issues, mental health issues that ultimately are not really under their jurisdiction as far as the best way to solve those issues. Now, I understand when you say the words defund the police, when you take it to a scale piece and you're saying, I want less money for a police department, that will incite bad feelings. It'll incite that it sounds like you're taking money off of somebody's table. And that's not something that I do agree with. So I think that this topic does need to be discussed a lot more, and we need to go more in depth to where we can work with our police departments and with our city budgets to find a middle ground to support our communities.
But just to be clear, you do support defund the police.
I support reallocating resources. I don't support defunding.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Rick.
Thank you. Yeah, I've talked about this a couple times before. LaJuan hit the nail on the head in Flint. I mean, I worked there for 23 years, and I can tell you when I hired on, we had over 300 police officers. We had people that were able to respond to the calls he's talking about, and they don't now. It's just not there. I think when you talk about reallocating, it's still taking money away from the police department. And I'm not so sure that that's the proper approach. I think that in lieu of defunding the police, so to speak, or taking money away, we need to work on allocating resources to the police department to increase training and awareness and things of that nature, and make them better prepared to deal with the situations that he talks about. The police do deal with a lot of mental health issues. And I know in previous shows that I've been on, we've talked about how, social workers could go in and maybe diffuse a situation, but that doesn't always work. And, ever since those conversations, I've seen some news articles where social workers have been attacked by these people that they're trying to talk to. So that's just further evidence that it's not really a smart move to throw a social worker into a situation, even though it may not be volatile now. It could quickly turn that way, and that's where the problems come in. And the fact that we're in the middle of this pandemic is going to make defunding the police even more tenuous, because you are going to see a market decrease in funds available to policing and communities in general because of the loss of tax dollars that have resulted from the shutdowns and everything that's happened because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, one of the things people keep talking about with defund the police is to try to start this new direction. I don't know what to call it. They want the funding, and they want to increase body cams. They want to increase the training. But generally, if you're going to make a market change in the police or any group like that, you start by hiring new people. I mean, that's one of them, right? Because then you've got a clean slate to work with. You don't have these old guys like me and Chris that are dyed in our wool, and we're not going to change. Even though that's not me and Chris, but that's the impression people get of us. But that's what happens. You get these old guys that they really are locked down, and they're really not going to change. You can't teach that old dog new tricks. But if you get a young guy in there, you can mold him, but you're not going to be able to do that because there's got to be anybody to hire him. There's not going to be any money to get body cams or dash cams in the cruisers. I can tell you the entire time I worked at the Flint Police Department, there were no body cams, no dash cams, none at all. We got in-car computers right near the end of my career. So, the technology in Flint wasn't there because we didn't have any money.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Sheriff?
Well, my answer is probably going to surprise you. I will tell you, because I've been having this conversation since it was first brought to my attention by Don Lemon on CNN. And it was about 4 days after that Friday where the entire country exploded. And I had never heard defund the police prior to that conversation. I think it probably was birthed somewhere out on the West Coast when you have a group of people that started the conversation of defund police, which just ran wild. I am in complete agreement to defund ignorant, ineffective police leadership. There are police agencies that have lost the touch of their communities and have built a culture that what Rick just talked about of people that do not want to build bridges with their community. Those people need to be defunded and bring in a police agency that does have the faith and trust of their community. Now, the third part is when you defund 911 responses, guess who pays the price? The Black community. Because it's not the white folks that are paying high tax dollars that are going to cut their police departments. It's the inner cities where people that try to strive and are living in the urban environments call 911 and nobody shows up. Like, how is that fair? I mean, how can someone based on their race and location not have the same 911 response as somebody who lives in another location? And so I think that what you talk about, James, the reallocation is a better word, because I think the defund is just like the verses you spoke out. It creates and conjures up so much emotion, but you can't defund law and order. You can't defund people who call 911 because of domestics or assaults or rapes or any of that, armed robberies. You're always going to have that. It started since the start of time. And I think this burden falls solely on the backs of law enforcement. And I say that because as a sheriff, I may be new to the role, but I'm not new to the game. Police leadership needs to step up more than they've ever stepped up before and create the relationships where communities have no desire to defund what they already love. And the only way to do that is to build and forge relationships like they've never forged before.
Okay, thank you. And Sheriff, I just want to make sure I'm clear on what I'm hearing. You are speaking about reallocation, but reallocation within the police system. Is that what I'm hearing, where you're saying that getting some new people, some new ideas and reallocate within the police system? Is that what I'm hearing?
I answer it in two parts, and I'll be brief because I don't want to take somebody's time. Sure. There's not all police officers are created equal, and certainly not all police agencies. A case in point, a sheriff. I have no boss other than the people that elected me. I don't answer to a mayor or city council, whereas in a city or a township, they have all those other layers that they have to answer to and respond to, which means that we have two different types of leadership responses. And there are people that have built a culture, and you see that now they're still riding in certain parts where the community does not trust their police department. There's no faith in it. So how can you even remotely try to fund something that there's no faith? Sometimes it's not a bad idea to go straight back to zero, bring in another agency, whether it's a sheriff's office or a state-funded police agency, in order to answer those 911 calls. And Rick will tell you, you want a great police department, answer your calls and investigate crimes. Build relationships, take care of the people, protect, serve, and unify. On the flip side, the sheriff's office in Genesee County, we're the 5th largest sheriff's office in the state of Michigan. We're the 9th biggest police agency in the state. My budget's $32.5 million. There's not any place that I can cut, because when you do that, the people pay the price. So that's why I said I agree with defund inadequate, ignorant, ineffective policing, where they create the problem. George Floyd, in 8 minutes and 46 seconds, changed American policing forever. And why? Because that agency created a culture where in broad daylight, he thought it was okay when people, including he, were begging for his life on video. That is a failure of a culture. And when you talk about training, it starts with the heart, and then it starts with the desire to make that change. So yes, long answer, short question. Defund those that aren't effective and reallocate where policing is effective.
So, and this is for everybody, you know, I've heard that too, you know, so how do we get there? How do we do that? Is it up to fellow police officers to step up and say, hey, you know, this needs to happen? How do we get there where we are, I guess, kind of exposing or bringing to light some of the bad apples? How do we do that? James?
If I could say something really cool. Rick and Sheriff, you guys are from Flint, and I think one of the biggest things is that when I grew up in Flint, the great thing about it was that we did have like a lot of diversity here among the races. You know, I went to Powers. I grew up in a Catholic school, but I also stayed in the Black neighborhood. So you know, I kind of got all the cultures, you know, when I was growing up. And I think one of the greatest disconnects with the police and the people is the fact that a lot of police who come into the force, they haven't had that chance to be introduced to their culture, to different cultures, and that's where the disconnect comes. Because I mean, I got to be honest with you that there's a lot of police who have a negative mindset about different races, and when you haven't ever been introduced to a different race, you bring those issues with you to the police force. And that affects how you police.
That's very true. That's very true. And I think we did talk about that briefly on the last show too. That's very true. James, and then Sheriff, you can go next after that.
And that's where the emotional response to defund the police can become dangerous, because on one side, we need our police we need to have faith in our police. They need to have training. They also need to have the support of the community. Defund the police has taken so much of it's caught so much of a firestorm because it's in response to a lack of what a lot of constituents see as a lack of accountability. So because of a lack of accountability, folks have gone to the opposite extreme end of defund the police.
That's right.
That is not an actual fix of what that situation is. Like he said, when you have a community that is defunded, that does see that now I don't have the money I can't pay officers to respond to those calls, nobody wins. When we get to the point that we are having these conversations now, these conversations also need to be had outside the context of a George Floyd, because once we get to too far of an emotional tie-in, defund the police, Blue Lives Matter, and I know we're going to go into that a little bit more later. These are emotional responses rather than solutions.
Yes, thank you. Sheriff?
Well, I agree, James. We don't need another George Floyd to get us to where we need to be. We need to continue this change and this reform. And I will tell you, you can't train the heart. The heart of a police agency starts with the leader of the police agency. That's why, to the point where people that are from the outside, if they don't know their community, they'll never have that connection. Especially if they're trained or brought up in a way that they see their local population as inferior or in whatever negative connotation. So when I say it's a heart change, and I'm only going to say because this is my style of leadership, that's why the sheriff's office and myself, we are so involved with our communities. I'm talking with the Nation of Islam, the Muslim nation, which are two different types of populations. I'm talking about the Jewish community, the Black community, the returning citizens community, the addiction community. So how do we do that? I force my people into that culture. We do community events that are not just a one-day deal. We don't have a community policing person. We are community policing throughout. We had a Christmas spectacular last Saturday. We give out 200 boxes of goods to people from all walks of life. I have them serve. When the COVID hit back in March, April, I had deputies that were serving baby diapers and formula to homes that they've never even been to. That's how you build relationships. You show that somebody that doesn't look like you, believe like you, or live like you, they're still a human being. And so now they don't have that resistance when they see them on the street or on a call. They've already had a good interaction.
Exactly. And thank you so much for saying that, because I wanted to touch on that point. And I think LaJuan touched on it too. When people grow up a certain way with certain presumptions and just beliefs and different indoctrinated thinking, when they see a person that reflects what they've been taught, they instantly either get, afraid, or they, get cautious, or they, get on edge. And that's where this emotion comes from. And if you have a gun and you feel threatened, because in your mind you feel threatened, nothing has actually happened. You just look at a person and say, oh, this person is threatening because of what I've been taught. Then your response sometimes is to protect yourself. And in your mind, you're thinking you have to do that. And you've been given a gun, and that's your only means to do it. So of course, I don't think that's happened with everything, but I think that all of us here, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that all of us can at least agree that there has been some unfortunate ending of life that shouldn't have happened, by the hands of law enforcement. And I do believe that, I've seen fear. I've seen people afraid. When people are afraid, watch out. And if they have a gun, watch out even more so. So I do believe that people do need to learn and get familiar with their communities, because I think I shared this before, but we had an officer in my neighborhood called Officer Dave, and we all knew him. I mean, he was big. He was a big guy, but we all knew Officer Dave. He played basketball with the kids at the basketball court. Yep. He was sitting in McDonald's with the little guys that ate the breakfast every morning. We all knew him. So when he showed up scene, nobody was intimidated or afraid, because we knew Dave, and we knew that he was there in a genuine spirit. So I do agree with people being a little bit more familiar with their neighborhood, because sometimes when you have police officers, and I don't know how it is in your community, Flint, but in some places, they don't even live anywhere near the community. I know. They come in and it's like, they don't even, they just don't have a clue. So I think that is also a good point. So thank you all for saying.
Was Officer Dave white or black?
He was black.
In what community was it?
I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm gonna tell you now, because I've had situations on both sides of this with police officers. So I don't care if the police officer is black, white. When I see a police officer come up, sometimes I instantly get on guard, because I don't know, in my mind, things play through my mind where I don't know how this is going to go. Sometimes I wear, a head wrap, I wear certain things, and people associate that with certain stuff, and I just don't know. I have 4 boys.
It's also being conscious of the fact that while in those situations, you are still somebody with a gun versus, in most cases, somebody without one.
Well, and I'm going to add this. I am a lawfully, I'm allowed to carry. And that scares me even more, because now I know that when they look up my name, they will see that I could possibly have a gun. And so then that adds to my anxiety, where it's like, okay, they see that I may have a gun with me, now what's coming next, so.
That is actually the exact reason I do not carry a gun.
Well, I carry because there's crazy people out here, and I need to be able to myself.
Ain't in Cincinnati anymore.
Yes. So I believe people should be able to protect themselves. I'm all for that. But of course, responsibly and, legally. So, but yeah, so I want to talk about the blue lives versus black lives, because this is really something that's really been on my mind, because this, as I stated earlier, this is the narrative that's been given to us. They have literally sold us on this whole black versus blue, and it just has really kind of boggled my mind, because if a person that's black says Black Lives Matter, a lot of people's responses are, well, Blue Lives Matter, and I don't understand that. I don't understand why those two have to be against each other, if that makes sense. I don't understand that disconnect on, well, my blue life matters and your, because to me, when people say that, it sounds like, well, yours doesn't, ours does. And that's how it sounds to me. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I just want to understand a little bit more. So I thought, why not bring people on here from law enforcement to help me understand maybe the narrative? Because I'm sure you all have spoken to people, and I've spoken to people who believe in Blue Lives Matter and have the flag on their trucks and houses and things of that nature. So I wanted to kind of understand a little bit more. Why is that the response? Why is that the response, as opposed to, let me learn more, or yes, it does matter, or and vice versa. Because it's happened on both sides of this. So I kind of want to understand that a little bit more. So I want to hear from the law enforcement officers first, and then LaJuan and James, I want you all to speak on the Black Lives Matter side of it, or whatever side you feel you want to speak on. So Rick, can you help me with this?
I'll give it a whirl. So I have a couple of issues with the whole Black Lives, Blue Lives thing anyway. This all started, I'm not sure where the Black Lives thing started, but the Blue Lives thing, everybody morphed the thin blue line flag into some kind of a symbol of, I don't know, anti-black maybe. I don't know what exactly it's got morphed into right now, but that was never the intent of the thin blue line. Basically, for lack of a better term, I think law enforcement are, domestic military, in a sense. And if you work in a community like Flint, and I spent 23 years there with probably 90% of that amount of time spent in the north end of Flint, and I know LaJuan knows what I'm talking about. I was up there, having at it. It was a war zone. I don't know how else to describe it. There were many days that I went years where I pulled my gun every single day, and it wasn't because I was scared to be up there. It was because the situation merited it.
Right.
So somehow everybody has taken this thin blue line and turned it into a Blue Lives Matter thing, and I'm not sure that was not the intent when it started, for sure. The Black Lives Matter movement, the problem that people in the white community have, I can tell you, with the Black Lives Matter movement is understanding whether we're talking about the movement or just saying somebody's life matters, because it's two different things.
So let me say something real quick, Rick, and then I'm gonna let you finish. For me personally, it is not the organization. For me personally, it is me when I look at my 4 black sons that are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", and they wear hoodies, and I fear for them driving somewhere at night, because somebody might, especially in today's climate right now with everything that's going on. So that for me is, where I sit when I say, that Black Life Matters. And I have watched the organization take money from communities and not give it back to them, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I have seen the organization kind of hijack the genuine feeling of my life matters, period. It's not, and it doesn't say anything that person's life doesn't matter. But right now I'm talking about my life, because that's what I think about when I see my children walk out, who to me are my children, but to somebody else, they look like a threat. And I'm like, they're not trying to hurt you, but that's how people see it. So Rick, continue.
Well, that's exactly the same thing we're dealing with here with the Blue Lives Matter. That's what a Blue Lives Matter person is saying. My life matters. There has been a conscientious attack on law enforcement in the last few years. There's been people that have been ambushed in their cruisers, all kinds of situations like that, based off of the stuff that we're seeing happen. And I blame the media. I blame the media for everything that's happening right here, with all the disconnect that we're seeing, the division, The wedges that are being driven, this is the media. The media is driving the wedge. Why? Why are we driving the wedge? There's no reason we can't all sit together like this and have a conversation and break bread for real if we wanted to. It shouldn't have to be about a black person, a white person, a blue life, a black life. Does not have to be about any of that. But that's where the problem is. Because when somebody, I think, says Blue Lives Matter, it's the same thing you're saying. If my mom tells somebody Blue Lives Matter, she was worried about me when I went to work for 23 years. Just like you're worried about your son going outside because somebody might view him as the bad guy. It's the same situation. And it's just we're looking at it from opposite ends of the spectrum. And I don't take anything away from Black Lives Matter. And I believe Black lives do matter. And I believe white lives matter. And I believe blue lives matter. Whatever lives you want to talk about, all lives matter. And I get where the Black Lives Matter is coming from because it was in the forefront at the time. But I don't know that anybody saying Blue Lives Matter is trying to take away. They're just trying to show you that, look, I have feelings too, and my life matters, or my son's life matters, or my brother's life matters, or whatever like that. So same thing that you're saying when you say Black Lives Matter, what your fear is, I think it's on the other foot. We have to learn how to understand that from each other. And like I said, I think the division is being driven by the mainstream media, and it kind of pisses me off, frankly. But it is what it is. But as long as we can continue to educate people in a situation like this, create a forum, then maybe we can defeat the wedge that they're trying to drive between us, and we can continue to grow as a community.
Sure. Sheriff Chris, give me 1 second. I just want to say something real quick before I lose my thought. So Rick, I just want to just be very transparent in regards to the conversation on the other side of that, what you just said in regards to, because some people say, well, law enforcement chose a job that they knew could possibly be dangerous, right? But a person that's Black, we didn't choose to be Black, right? So that's some people's narrative, and I'm just trying to be very transparent in the conversation. And then also, the idea, like when a person, because I know for a fact there are, and you may not be saying it, but there are definitely people that when you say Black Lives Matter, they are discounting that and saying no, Blue Lives Matter, and it's a very negative exchange, which is unfortunate. But with that said, when a person says, well, Black Lives Matter, then somebody responds with, well, all lives matter or something. It's just, to me, it just takes away from the conversation. Because if I say, my mother has cancer, and then somebody says, well, my dad had cancer, it's like, well, we're not talking about your dad right now. We're talking about my mom, and I need you to be empathetic in this moment. You get what I'm saying? So I think that's where some of for me, the disconnect is happening for me, when people respond that way, because it never comes like, well, Blue Lives Matter too. That's never how I hear it. I always hear it where it's very like angry, and it's like, okay, that's all right. We can talk about this together. But Sheriff, I want you to go ahead and say what you feel about it.
Well, Aaron, I love what you're preaching right now, and I'm going to use a different analogy that'll bring in Luan, my union brother. When General Motors was on strike last year for 40 days, nobody talked about Ford. Nobody talked about Chrysler. They're still union, but at that moment, it was about General Motors workers. And they were the ones that the spotlight was on. So I don't get wrapped around the axle when people talk about blue lives and all. I know I matter. I mean, I've dedicated my entire life. I'm third generation police. My dad and grandpa are both from Detroit police. I was in the honor guard for 24 years doing police funerals. I know for a fact, my dear brother and dear friend, Sheriff Benny Napoleon, a Black police officer, will be celebrated by all races because of what he gave as a police officer to the Wayne County Sheriff's Office, Detroit Police Department. I mean, he was a good man. So I think a lot of people just, they take something and they maybe want to create more of an issue. I mean, firefighters are important, but the issue is not firefighters. The issue is the fact that we have this incident in May where a white police officer was on the back of the neck of a Black man for almost 9 minutes. And if the roles reversed and Rick and I walked up and saw a Black person on a white police officer's neck, that'd have been a fatal situation. And so I don't get all caught up in that. I know I matter. I know Black folks matter, white folks. people's lives matter. I've been a paramedic since I was 20 years old. I've tried to save thousands and thousands of lives, and I've never answered a 911 call and based my response on saving a life based on what race they are, what religion they are, or where they live. So I think, you know, with these conversations and all the things we're talking about breaking down bridges and doing that, you know, that's what we're going to have micro successes. This isn't going to turn overnight. This is going to be a cultural change, and you need bright leaders on all walks of life. Like what you said, Aaron, I'm telling you, I wish you'd precept from the mountainside, because when people say Black Lives Matter,
to the mountain.
Yeah, just don't look at the organization as much. Look at that as a population. I mean, that's what I'm saying. The population matters. And I think once people realize that, they're like, oh, wait a second, I don't have to be so angry. And then you can stop this divide. I mean, trust me, I know my Black brothers matter. They matter just as much as my blue brothers.
Thank you. You know, and that's the thing. And then I want you, Lawan and James, to go. But that's the thing, is that, you know, I think that we can agree that some people they don't believe Black Lives Matter. There are some people in the world that believe that, and that's okay. But I think also when people are not, and I've said this 1,000 times, when people are not directly impacted by something, they just don't get it. And I think that's what it is sometimes when you are not directly impacted. And again, I still believe there's other parts of this. I mean, there's so much to unpack from this, but I'm just speaking very generally. When people are not directly impacted by things, it just, you know, just like for me, I will never understand what it's like to be a police officer. I will never, trust me, I will never understand it, because it's not a job that I want to do. So I appreciate people that do it. But, you know, my point in saying that is that, you know, there's certain things that we just don't understand I don't want to say understand, but can't connect with sometimes because we're not directly impacted by it. So, Lawan, what do you feel about Black Lives Matter versus the whole Blue Lives Matter?
First, let me say that I believe in the saying Black Lives Matter, but I'm not really a part of the organization. And I think the divide with the Blue Lives Matter is driven by just not the police per se, but the general population. I'll give it for instance, like we had a whole bunch of high-profile cases going on with police and black men. Philando Castile, the young guy who got shot by the police in Cleveland. Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, and when you see those high-profile cases, it's almost like the divide comes like, I need to see the video. You know, it's almost like when something happens to the black guy, there's always we got to prove that, you know, we weren't in the wrong first, even if you see it on video. So I believe the disconnect is more of, once again, it's a cultural thing. It's how you grew up, how you see people, how you view things. So a lot of times when things happen to us, we're always presumed guilty, you know, before the evidence, even when the evidence says we're not, you know. So I think the Blue Lives thing, the Blue Lives Matter thing is more driven by the population than it is the so-called police.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, James.
Can I also respond to Lawan, because he's spot on?
It's always.
Oh, sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Sharon. Respond real quick, and then James, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just be 10 seconds.
Sure.
Police are the worst to call out we do something wrong. And that's why you have that hesitation. And it's the most dividing answer when they say no comment or we don't know. Call what's wrong. You don't have to wait 3 months. Just call it wrong. And I will tell you that there's people in our field that do not belong in our field. This year alone, it's my first year as sheriff, and I fired 6 people already.
Oh,
because
wow.
You can't have people in this field. And then especially when you have law enforcement in Minneapolis, it took that chief 6 days to come out and meet the public. 6 days. Like, you can't wait that long. So let me just say, in our agency, I've already got it pre-planned. God forbid something happen. Whatever population is impacted, I have somebody right next to me from that population giving me their guidance, because I don't know what it's like to be in that world. So help me understand, because perception's reality.
That's true. That is true. Amen. Go ahead, James.
I think the thing I would really like to illuminate here is when I had this show started, I really wanted to get the law enforcement view of it, because in my heard Blue Lives Matter as a response to Black Lives Matter after Black Lives has been said. So I view Blue Lives Matter as just a agree with the statement of Black Lives Matter. Now, if we would like to discuss organizations, that's fine. However, most people, when they say a Black Lives Matter organization and where it is funded, they are talking about this in a response to an African-American person being murdered by law enforcement with a lack of accountability. This is where the Black Lives Matter hashtag, this is where the movement from, and however you feel about their existence, this was their genesis. So until we discuss the fact that our country was based on 400 years of chattel slavery that tied into Jim Crow, that tied into the fact that my mother was only just recently allowed to go to school with kids of other races, until we deal with those issues to connect that to Black Lives Matter, because I've never heard Blue Lives Matter from a police officer before in my life. Now we do, exactly.
Yeah,
and we do understand, and we understand the consequences of if something were to happen to one of those blue lives. We actually see that the blue life, if we are going to call it a life, is one of the more protected lives in our society. When we say Black Lives Matter, we simply say it to illuminate the fact that historically, Black lives in this country have not mattered. And this is the vocation of a desire for that to change.
Well said.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all these points. You know, it's just been very, and James, you hit it on the head. You know, I've never heard until recently, you know, I heard a police officer say it, but I never really heard that before. And it only, to me, started coming out, you know, the flags and stuff, once a lot of this stuff happened when it came to Black lives. And for me, it's a little disheartening sometimes, because this isn't a attack on police officers from my perspective. Again, like James stated, it's more of an accountability where anybody who does something that's not right should have some type of consequence. Nobody is above the law. And, you know, so, and I understand the hesitation sometimes with saying we made a mistake. Who wants to say a mistake? Hospitals do the same thing. I mean, lawyers do the same. I mean, people do that all the time, right? They don't want to admit.
That's very
not lawyers.
Not lawyers, not Rick.
They don't ever admit a mistake.
So we know that people don't like admitting mistakes. So that's a given, especially when you know that when you come outside and meet the public, you are meeting some rage. Okay. So I get that, you know, but I think that we have to do better. We have to do better with some accountability, because nobody is above the law. And, you know, when people do things that, because I remember years ago when people were getting, you know, murdered or supposedly murdered or said to be murdered, you know, everyone kept saying, well, once we get video cams, that'll solve all that. That was the solution, right? And video cams out. I'll never remember, and I cannot remember the gentleman's name. I mean, it's been quite a few, but he was running across an open field. Like his back was to the police officer, and he got, I mean, it was just like, and he fell. And I remember everybody saying, okay, we have the video. I mean, it's case closed. There it is. And still nothing. You know, it's gotten to the point now, and I hate to admit this, but it's the truth. When I see police killings, when it's that type of interaction, I don't know how I feel. Like, I feel sad, but then I kind of move on to something else, because I think we've been kind of desensitized at times, because we know that to get emotionally involved and then it kind of end the same way is just exhausting. It's exhausting. So I think it's really taking a toll on us. So I'm really trying to figure out how we can solve this disconnect, because there is definitely a disconnect in our country right now in regards to Black lives versus blue lives. That's a given. I mean, it is very clear at any rally or protest you've seen this summer, this fall, it was very clear that there is a disconnect. And I know, Sheriff, you did something that not a lot of sheriffs and community leaders did. Can you talk about that? Or Rick, do you want to talk about it? I know you were proud of it.
No, I'll talk about it. That's part of the reason I asked Chris to come on the show with me, because we watched all the news feeds in May when all hell was breaking loose all over the United States of America, and there was riots in every major city, and all these cities were bracing for the worst every time they talked about having a Black Lives rally in their community, and Flint was no different. We didn't know what was getting ready to happen, and so the rally started, and it appeared that it was heading in that direction for a hot minute. And our fearless leader, Sheriff Swanson, he approached one of the leaders of the group, and he put his baton down and took his helmet off and listened to him for a minute, and then marched with him. And I mean, it showed some unity, and really that's the message that needs to be sent. And these types of interactions are what need to be sent to change that narrative that you're talking about, because you look at the faces on the screen right now, and this is exactly what everybody's talking about. We talked about that before we went on the air. Two white police officers and a bunch of black people sitting here talking about the difference between the police and the Black Lives Matter. But you can obviously tell by the conversation we're having that we aren't really the ones. Right. So it's not that way. It's just not. So are they out there? Absolutely, they're out there. But it doesn't have to be this way. And these kind of like the sheriff said earlier, it's going to be just a little bit at a time, a little piece of the puzzle here, a little piece of the puzzle there. This is part of the puzzle. But I'll let the sheriff talk about what he did, because it was pretty cool.
Well, I appreciate it. And I will tell you that it was a spirit-led moment. I'd love to take credit for it. I'd love to say that I planned on it. It wasn't that at all. I was just like everybody else. We planned on it to be a riot that day. We had tear gas, pepper bullets, rubber bullets. We had baton shields. We were going to be a statistic. But by God's grace, I thought it'd be better when this thing was busting loose. And I don't want to take much time, but it was a buildup. Rick is spot on. It's almost like when we're all in school and you knew the flight was at 3:00. The whole day was just full of tension. And that's what happened starting from that first rally. And when I took my helmet off, it was a psychological message that, number one, I'm going to be vulnerable, probably the worst tactical decision I could make. But number two, it showed that I'm not intimidated, because I wanted to hear what they had to say. And at the time that I did that, I walked into the crowd. There's a black pastor. I know that Rick knows him well, Jeff Hawkins. He's got 2 kids killed in 2 different homicides. He's a buddy of mine. I've known him for 8 years. And I just happened to call him, and I said, "Hey, where are you?" And he goes, "I'm in the crowd." I said, "Where in the crowd?" He told me he's about 15 yards in. I said, "Don't move. I'm coming to you." And I wanted folks to see that this white guy was going to walk into the crowd and embrace a black guy. Pure instinct like that. None of that was, as I said, pre-planned. And what I found out later on is that all those that were marching had street PhDs. They know authenticity. They know if there's heart behind that. And as soon as I looked to my right, and one of the organizers, who I've never seen since and I never saw before, came up to me, and I said, "Bro, that guy in Minneapolis, he's not who we are." Rick just talked about that. I said, "These cops, they love you." I said, "That cop over there, he'll give you a hug." And he said, and I said, "What do you need me to do?" And he goes, "Tell the people you just told me." And the first part of the video was exactly me asking that. And when they chanted, "Walk with us," what I found out looking back, it was that one thing that when you talk about it, James, it was like 400 years of people saying the same thing. Like, when are you going to listen to us? Especially being a white police commander. And then I said, "Let's walk." So think about it psychologically. Somebody had to take the first move, and then something had to be said, and then something had to be heard, and then another action, and then another said, and another, and then finally we walked. And since that day, May 30th, within 48 hours, that moment reached 3.2 billion people. Billion. And since that moment, it's been 40 protests later, 40. We've not had a single arrest, not a single glass broke, not a single board snap. Flint is now seen as, hey, you can sit down and have these conversations, because what we all agree on is this is the norm. People like James, Lawan, and Aaron, and Rick, and I, we could all hang out and go for a weekend away to Vegas and have a great time.
Oh, sure. Okay.
That's right. But the far fringes, they're the ones that cause the problems for all of us.
Yeah.
And that's where what I found was, and now this is going to be the key, and I'll end on this, is at that moment that I said, let's walk, there was a scale of balance.
A shift.
Yes. And what happened was it was so outweighed that now it balanced the ship. Like, okay, this person heard what we had to say. Now he understands that we have pain, so we will take the first step. Like, I'd love to take credit for that, but I didn't. They had to take the first step. I had to take the next step, and it one step at a time, which is how we're going to solve this problem. And the more, and this is what I found, the more people who gathered around that mission to send the message that we can fix this, it drowned out all those others that allowed discord and disobedience and destruction in other cities. In those cities that are burning right now, Seattle, Portland, all those places, it's because that balance is still way out of proportion. This is what police leadership needs to do. They need to bring it in to say, okay, now let's take a walk. Now let's talk. And that's what's going to help. And that's what did here. And I will tell you, one of the greatest, I hit 150 different news stations around the world, from Russia to Israel to the UK to Australia to Canada.
Yeah, went everywhere.
And, I'm just telling you, the greatest moment is when anybody who I talked to said the word hope. And when they used the word hope, I knew that's exactly what I wanted. I want people who feel oppressed to have hope that it's going to get better. I want cops to have hope that this is still a great profession and we have great days ahead. I don't want 3 African-American boys with a great mom to fear that when they get pulled over by the police that they're going to die. I have hope that that's going to happen. And so I can't change everybody, but I know what I can do.
Yeah. No, but thank you. That was great. And that's really it. I mean, we have to have these conversations. We have to talk about it. We have to be open to it and transparent. All this, side talking. We have to just be very clear, because I always like to ask people, can we at least agree that there has been some oppression in the United States? I mean, there has been that has happened. There has been some narratives that have been spun towards different demographics, and people believe it because if they only watch, certain people watch certain channels and listen to certain music and look at certain videos or movies, and they believe what they see. And it's like, what? No, I'm not into that. So people build these narratives up in their head. And I know Rick talked about it earlier, and James, I know you gave a face, but because you are a part of the media. But sometimes I do agree that the media, because it's good stories. It's good to spin that type of stuff because they know it gets people emotionally charged. There's money in it. I mean, we can say that there's money in certain narratives. So when people continue on with these narratives, and there's still some good reporters out there and journalists out there, but a lot of times these big main ones, they pick up these stories and they run with it. And I mean, and I want to say, Rick, to your point earlier about the panel, and I shared it with you all, but I wanted to share with the audience. I tried to get a black officer, and I also had a white lady that was going to come on the Black Lives Matter side, so that we could kind of have not so, because I didn't want to feed into this narrative, which it looks like we are doing right now. But again, I'm rambling right now, but I just want to let everybody know that I really appreciate this conversation, because it's so important for us to do this, because I don't like being anxious. Yeah. Oh, are you talking to somebody?
No, I was raising my hand.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
To your point, what you just said, if somebody were to step into this conversation right now that is a white police officer, and somebody were going to step in this conversation that was somebody who's black in America, I wish, and this is why I have hope, that they wouldn't see 2 black guys and a black lady and 2 white police officers, but they would see our heart. That's what's going to be the change, because with looking at me as a white guy, you don't know me because you don't know my heart. It's my obligation to show that to you. That's why every time that we have 5 on here, and whoever's going to watch this, if we can just multiply that perception that, listen, not all black people are bad. and not all white police officers are bad. We can actually join together. That's where unity comes from. And that's the hope. And that's why I'm so glad that Rick invited me, because I would never have known about this conversation with you, even though I've had them all over the place.
Sure.
And that's why even doing 5 or 5,000, it's got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's where the power of your platform being in media, whether it's James or you using your own podcast.
Am I media? Oh my goodness.
You are media, girl. You are media. But there's just as much power if you use it for good, just like law enforcement using their profession for good.
Yeah. And LaJuan, I want you, we're going to do some closing thoughts right quick. But Chris, Sheriff, I really appreciate you talking about what you're doing in your unit too, in regards to getting people out into the community. That's so important to be a little bit visible. I know it's a lot of police officers around that have been dancing and doing. Are you dancing too, Chris Sheriff? Do you dance?
Dude, I got soul in me. Trust me.
Oh,
but I do better
okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So we're going to do some closing remarks. LaJuan, did you have anything that you want to close on? Because we can talk about this conversation all day. I have so much that I want to ask, but we don't have enough time. We may have to do a part 4 down the line somewhere. But because this is something that we have to keep building on. We have to keep building on these conversations and getting this word out. So LaJuan?
I just want to say thanks for inviting me to the conversation. It was a pleasure talking to everyone. And I gotta agree. My last statement is I'm gonna take it from the sheriff that change gotta come from the heart.
Yeah. It is. Thank you so much, LaJuan, for being here in the heart. And I like how you said it's my obligation to show it. That's how I live my life. People make assumptions all the time. People see me, and I'm gonna be very transparent. I've made assumptions. I've shared it before when I'm talking to youth. But I remember, I'm gonna say this real quick, and then I'm gonna let everybody do their closing. But I remember I was on the side of the road this years ago, and I'm stuck there, and my car was acting up, and a guy pulled up in this pickup truck. That was, loud pickup trucks. They put the stuff on the truck to make it louder, which I don't understand that, but that's not my business. And comes up with this truck. He has on like the flannel. I mean, he had this whole look, right? The cut off, and the beard and the bald head. And he comes up, and I'm like, oh my God, why is this guy pulling up? Because I see this image, right? And I see this image, and I was new to the area because I grew up in Cincinnati, and when I moved here, you saw that all the time, and I didn't really see it a lot coming from where I was, and it was a certain narrative around that look, right? So he's pulling up, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm here by myself. And this is before like cell phones was really, big. And I'm like, oh my God. And he comes up and he goes, do you need any help? I see you broke down. And I was like, and I had this breath of relief, and then I felt bad. I was convicted because I'm like, I made this assumption about him, and he's trying to help me. And I'm scared to death. Like, oh my goodness. And that was before I was packing. No, I'm kidding. So anyway, but with that said, I was nervous, but I just want to say, we all have biases. We all have different things that we've been fed, and it's up to us. It's our obligation to correct that, learn, unpack, and deal with that. So I appreciate you saying that. James, did you want to say anything closing out?
Yes, we have the responsibility to be active in our communities. We have the responsibility to be cooperative in our communities. The reason why this 400 plus year experiment works with all of our different races, creeds, religions, and beliefs is because we are all ultimately here to work together for the greater good of all of us. So I do appreciate these conversations and the opportunity to have it. And Chef Chris, I wanted to say the one thing that you hit on was hope. It was amazing, especially being somebody who is in the media, to all the stories that we have of protest, violence. That was one story we were able to say that was cooperative, community, solving an issue that's right now, and it was in our state of Michigan. And I was proud that came from our area.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, James. And that showed active listening. That showed that you see me. That shows that you're hearing me. And I think that a lot of riots and looting, and don't get me wrong, I understand that some people came into different communities and did that because they like to be destructive. We know that for a fact that people did that. But at the heart of most of those communities, there are people that are genuinely hurting. There are people, because I've lived in communities where we've called the police and nobody showed up, like nobody. And it's like people are dying or people are hurting and nobody showed up. So I understand understand the hurt feeling and the disappointment. So when a person feels like they're not being heard or seen, they act out. I mean, look at children. I mean, children are a prime example. If you don't listen to them or address them, they will act out. So, I mean, that's what took place in some of the instances. So, Rick, did you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, just briefly, I want to thank you again for having me on. It's been a pleasure. Nice talking with LaJuan and James, and of course, Sheriff Swanson and you, Aaron, of course. Always a great host. And
Thank you.
so, I mean, this is all very important. I mean, the fact that we can have these conversations is the key to everything. I grew up in Flint, like I said, and LaJuan struck on it earlier when he said that, we view things in Flint a little bit different because we always seem to get along because we always had that diversity, when we were here. So I used to make the comment about Angelo's Coney Island over on the east side of Flint because you used to be able to go in there at about 2 o'clock in the morning and you could have Joe the Bum sitting in one booth and a state senator sitting in another booth and, some dude from the neighborhood over here. I mean, it was a melting pot, and the city's really that way. And I tell people all the time that Flint's different than any place else in the world, and I think that's absolutely a fact. And I'm proud of that fact, to be honest with you. And I think because we're from Flint, that we have the ability to adapt and to, kind of make ourselves somebody that can fit in any circumstance. So let's keep on doing what we're doing and reach out in the community and try to have more of these conversations and pull more people in so that we can undo the divide that the mainstream media like James is trying to push.
Thank you, Rick. Sheriff.
Well, I will just tell you that the greatest leaders in world history were always people that united and brought people together. And I have been in training for 29 years to be in my current position. And in one moment, the world got to see what's been in my heart. And since that moment, and even up until today, there's a cry for people to step up and unite like never before. And so I thought perhaps that one day that I'd be in a position that I could have great influence because I've always dreamt of that. But that day is now. And you have my word that I will continue to use this platform, and I will pray for doors to be open supernaturally to create a unity like this world has never seen. And I have this personal mission to do that. And I trust that the millions and millions of people that will benefit from it will see that hope and believe one more day that it's a reality. You have my word.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sheriff. I just thank you all for being here today and having this conversation. It's so important for us to be transparent. It's so important for us to be honest. And the reason why I invited the people here, and then, Rick, you reached out to the sheriff, is because I trusted that you all would be honest and transparent. We don't get anywhere by faking it. We have to be real with each other and just call it what it is, because we do understand that there's some things going on. We get that it is, and we have to be able to say that first and then say, okay, how are we going to deal with it? How are we going to unpack this and heal? This is a country that needs some healing. And but first, before you heal, you have to be honest with what hurt you. So again, thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Defunding the police. And I use that again. That's a term that's being used. I hate that term because I think it just sends people down a rabbit hole that doesn't need to be gone down. But again, just reallocation and some different things and see how this works out. I don't know where we are now. I don't know what it's looking like in different communities. I know some places have tried it with some success and some haven't had much success. So I guess we'll see. And I think we're going to revisit this conversation as well, because I think this is something that needs to be an ongoing dialogue. We need to keep talking to each other and understanding each other and trying to see it from both sides of things. So thank you guys again so much. I appreciate it. I wish you all a great night, and I wish you all well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rick.
Have a good night.
Thanks, y'all.
Wow, that was awesome. I really enjoyed that conversation. I'm just being able to talk with everybody. You know, at times, sometimes we don't always agree with each other. We don't always maybe see eye to eye with everything 100%. But what we can agree with is that we have work to do, and we can work together from both sides to try to heal this land. It's really important. So I really appreciate everyone that took the time to be here this evening to talk about that. It's just really important. I appreciate everyone that took the time to watch and give your input also in the chat. So I wish you all a great, great evening. Thank you so much.